when 10 female bodies, aged between 12 and 28, were sequentially discovered on the hillsides outside Los Angeles in just over a year, the shadow of fear loomed over the city of angels. Who is responsible for this? On October 17, 1977, residents of Los Angeles, California, discovered the body of a prostitute, dead in a disintegrated state, raped at Forest Lawn Cemetery. Through verification, the investigating agency concluded that the victim was strangled to death. The owner of the nearby music store, Ronald Lemieux, was the last person to see the girl alive. The witness reported seeing two men wearing police badges dragging the girl down the road, handcuffing her and escorting her to an unknown vehicle. Less than 2 weeks later, there was another victim. The body of the victim, a 15-year-old who worked as a sex worker, was found in a residential area near La Crescenta district with bruises on his neck and limbs. Raped and strangled, the victim died 6 hours before she was discovered. The victim showed signs of rape, but there was no disturbance around the scene. Police suspect the victim was murdered at another location and was brought there for funeral. Later that afternoon, police discovered the bodies of two young girls on the other side of the hill. The bodies of both were hidden under a pile of garbage, which was in the process of decomposing. The theory is that the two victims were killed and buried here. The identities of the two victims were identified as 12-year-old Dolores Cepeda and 14-year-old Sonia Johnson. They had gone missing about a week earlier. The last time they were seen, the two were on their way home from Ignatius High School. After getting off the bus, the two stopped to talk to an unknown man. On November 23rd, the day before Thanksgiving, the body of a young girl was found near the Los Feliz area. The victim had gone missing 2 weeks earlier. In 3 months, the city investigation agency received 5 consecutive murders with 6 victims. What the girls have in common is their very young age. Although Los Angeles investigators tried to prove the cases were unrelated, locals and the media dismissed them as mass murders. The perpetrator was dubbed the Hillside Killer due to the many victims discovered in the area. Residents have been warned to refrain from leaving their homes late at night, lock their doors and learn how to defend themselves. At the same time, Los Angeles police formed a 30-member homicide investigation team determined to find the perpetrator. Again, there were no immediate signs of suspicious activity. However, by November 29th, investigators discovered another female victim's body on Glendale Hill. The victim's palms bore burn marks similar to those found on the arm of a previous victim. Police also found a semen sample, believed to be from the perpetrator, near the crime scene. The victim of this incident was Lauren Wagner, 18, a college student living with her parents in the San Fernando Valley. Her car was parked in the neighborhood near her home, with the car door left ajar. During interviews with residents in the vicinity, police encountered Beulah, the owner of the house opposite where the car was found, appearing fearful and hesitant. She revealed receiving a call from an unknown number instructing her not to disclose anything she saw the previous night. The caller, a man with a New York accent, made her aware that what she witnessed the previous night was a kidnapping. Specifically, Beulah witnessed 2 men in a white car forcing Lauren's car to the curb and dragging the victim out of the vehicle. Beulah described the abductors as young men, one of whom was tall and the other had a pockmarked face with acne, stout build, thick hair, and a mustache. If seen again, she believed she could identify one of the 2 men. However, due to very few leads, investigators were unable to pinpoint suspects and the perpetrator. Female victims continued to be discovered in the frustration of investigators over 2 years. By February 1978, the sudden killings came to a halt. The case reached a deadlock as the police were at a dead end, and the investigation stalled. It is estimated that at least 10 victims were murdered during this time. A year later, in the capital city of Washington, Karen Mandick and Diane Wilder, 2 students from Western Washington University, were found raped and murdered in their own car. Through suspect profiling, the police suspected a security guard at the place where the two students worked part-time was linked to the crime. This individual was Kenneth Bianchi. Bianchi had moved to Washington in May 1978. By January 1979, he had raped and killed Karen and Diane. The day after the murders, Bianchi was immediately arrested. During the investigation, the police discovered that the suspect had a California driver's license. Because Bianchi's method of killing bore similarities to the serial killings in Los Angeles, the police suspected Bianchi's involvement in the Hillside Strangler case. Initially, Bianchi consistently claimed he was insane, suffering from multiple personality disorder, but the police believed he was lying. Upon searching the suspect's residence, the police found numerous pieces of jewelry belonging to the victims of the Los Angeles cases. Witness Beulah also confirmed that Bianchi was one of the abductors of the victim Lauren Wagner 2 years earlier. This led the police to question whether the Hillside Stranglers were actually two individuals connected to each other. This argument was supported by the relatively clean and discreet crime scenes in Los Angeles, which prevented investigators from finding the killer's traces. However, in the Washington murder case, Bianchi had left too many flaws in the process of committing the crime and evidence at the crime scene. Therefore, the police believed that either there was someone assisting Bianchi in the Los Angeles killings or Bianchi was the accomplice of this individual. Digging into the investigation, police discovered that Bianchi had sent letters to his cousin, Angelo Buono. In the letter, he mentioned that he had threatened to kill two young girls who worked as prostitutes. Police suspect the brother is the second Hillside killer. To prove that theory true, the Los Angeles prosecutor's office offered Bianchi clemency if he admitted to being the perpetrator in the cases and revealed his accomplices. Bianchi immediately agreed and gave credible testimony accusing Angelo of being the second perpetrator. Los Angeles investigators found plenty of evidence pointing to Bianchi and Buono as Hillside killers. These are hairs and belongings of victims who have been deceived and abused by both. Two witnesses also claimed Buono was one of two suspicious people they saw near the scene. With the testimony of the two perpetrators, the police gradually recreated how they enticed the victim. Bianchi said he and Buono disguised themselves as police officers and wore fake badges to trick victims into following them into fake police cars. This trick works relatively well for sex workers, but for young girls, persuasion is not easy. Most victims were sexually assaulted and strangled to death. Their bodies were dumped in a hillside area in Los Angeles. According to police, the effects of growing up also greatly influenced Bianchi and Buono's perceptions and unethical behavior. Born on May 22, 1951 in New York, Kenneth Alessio Bianchi was born to a mother who was a prostitute and a heavy drinker, so he was put up for adoption at a very young age. In 1971, Bianchi married a young girl, but his wife left after 8 months. At the age of 26, Bianchi moved in with his cousin, Angelo Buono, in Los Angeles and worked as a security guard for a mall. There, he married Kelly Boy and had a son. Not long after Bianchi lost his job, the couple had a conflict. Kelly left with his son. Repeatedly abandoned by the women he loved, Bianchi harbored hatred. Meanwhile, Angelo Buono has distorted thoughts about sex. He had been married several times and had children, but the children were sexually abused by Buono. After divorcing his wife, he opened a relatively large upholstery store, attracting young girls in the neighborhood. In late 1975, Buono began enticing Bianchi to approach and sexually exploit young girls and then murder them to silence them. However, in February 1978, Bianchi decided to move to Washington, ending the gloomy days in Los Angeles. Bianchi was sentenced to life imprisonment in Washington before being transferred to California to serve his sentence. Angelo Buono was arrested on October 22, 1979. In 1981, Bianchi suddenly changed his testimony, admitting that he had lied about his cousin Buono's involvement in the murders. The judge at the time agreed to dismiss the charges against Buono. However, later on, prosecutors asserted that the evidence proving Buono's guilt in the murders was entirely valid. On October 31, 1983, Buono was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In November 1983, the jury concluded that Buono was guilty of killing 9 out of the 10 murder cases, sentencing him to 9 life imprisonments without parole. With a duration of 2 years and 2 days, this was the longest criminal trial in U.S. history and cost $2 million to Los Angeles County. The judge criticized Kenneth for his efforts to sabotage the case, deliberately prolonging the trial, and affirmed that the killer duo would never be pardoned. On September 21, 2002, Angelo Buono, aged 67, died of a heart attack in prison. The Hillside Strangler case is one of the most gruesome and horrifying serial murder cases in the United States, becoming the subject of films and television series such as The Case of the Hillside Stranglers, 1989, The Hillside Stranglers, 2001 to 2004, Rampage, The Hillside Strangler Murders, 2006, and the book Letters from Serial Killers, The Legion of the Damned by criminologist Christopher Barry D. The Hillside Strangler case is not only a serial murder case but also a symbol of the cruelty and darkness within the human mind. Through this, we can see how depravity and deviation in the psyche have caused pain not only for the victims and their families but also for the entire community and society. With their exposure and conviction, Kenneth Bianchi and Angelo Buono ultimately faced justice and punishment for the horrific crimes they committed. The sentencing of these two evil foes marks a significant step towards bringing justice to the victims and their families. What are your thoughts on this? Please leave your comments below to let us know.